Hello everyone, welcome to Letterkenny Island Developers Group. So we'll start with our 10th session today. So we'll talk about preparing for admin certification and also dive into security model and talk about security model in detail. So about me, I'm Nishant Singh Panwar. I'm the community group leader for Letterkenny Developers Group. I am also a developer consultant and architect with Pramerica in Letterkenny and a Trailblazers Ranger and Salesforce certified professional. And you can reach out to me on my Twitter handle, which is Nishant_SP. So for smooth action of today's meeting, just keep your videos off. We'll be recording the session and keep your on the mute. You can keep note of the questions, things you come across while the meeting, and then we can take them in the last question answer session. So today's agenda will talk about the community, what we have at the moment, and we'll then move on to the Salesforce Admin certification. We'll talk about the exams overview and then go into detail security model, and then also talk about other important topics which we have apart from security model. And then we'll also hear a Trailblazer story. So we'll talk to one of our colleague group member who recently cleared the admin certification, and then we'll talk about the upcoming events we have in the community. So starting with the community, so we have the Letterkenny Developers Group community set up since last year. We have a 10th event today, and you can reach out to the community with the chatter group we have. So that is LKSF chatter, where we post the upcoming events and the details. And also this is the community group page, LKSF devs, where if you can join the group and you will get notified about all the upcoming events. Then you can follow us on the social handles, Twitter, Facebook, and all the recordings which we do for the events will be posted on the YouTube at LKSF videos. So starting with the today's main agenda, which is Salesforce certification. So we'll try to talk about Salesforce administrator. So before we start, we'll try to see what a Salesforce administrator is with a short video. Let me play this video for you all. Just a minute.
What is a Salesforce administrator? Salesforce admins go by many names. They are productivity powerhouses, CRM rock stars, and Salesforce superheroes. They are your trusted advisors on all things Salesforce and a vital bridge between business and technology. So what exactly do they do? Salesforce admins can work on their own or as part of a team. They work alongside management to bring innovation to life, streamline processes, and keep the bottom line moving forward. Admins work hard to fight inefficiency and champion productivity. They probe the depths of the Salesforce ecosystem. They learn all of Salesforce's newest features and make sure every employee is up to speed. Salesforce admins are part advisor, part artist. They create awesome tools on any device, like easy-to-use dashboards, intelligent workflows, and apps for any project. And most importantly, they are there whenever you need them to keep your users educated, your problems solved, and your projects moving forward. A Salesforce admin delivers creative solutions, making your users happier and your business smarter. So next time you ask, what does a Salesforce admin do? Maybe you should ask, what don't they do? Learn more at admin.salesforce.com.
Okay. So as you saw that Salesforce admins are someone who does a lot of the things under the hood. They try to do the business gathering, requirement gathering, and they also take care of learning the new features which are coming into Salesforce and rolling out them to the users. Switch this. Yeah. So and they take care of all the managing the Salesforce implementation in and out, coordinating with the developers, sending out the requirements, and doing on the go small configuration and things where and managing the users. So these are the four major core responsibilities of admin, and based on these only we'll see the certification exam is also outlined. So these are the four responsibilities which admin mainly do, part of the their roles and responsibilities, like managing the user. So first one is user management, where they take care of the training, adoption, uh, giving access to the various users so that they can uh, do various actions into the Salesforce environment, setting up the data into the system for them to use, validating the data, and customization around those objects and fields. And then third is very most important, security, making sure that everything is in line, nobody is accessing the data which they should not, and those things. And lastly, giving out the reports for the managers and higher management teams, that how the business is performing based on the Salesforce data. So talking about the exam now, I have splitted the whole exam. So this is the outline of the exam, which you can find on the Trailhead as well. So these are various topics in which the exam tries to assess you. If you break them into the three parts, so I have split them into three major sections, where the first one is the 20% of it, which is majorly focusing on the security and the user setup. And then second part is the data management, analytics, and workflow process automation. So this second part is something which is more of tools, things which are present in the Salesforce, which you can use to customize the Salesforce application based on your business requirements. So these are all those things. And then the third part is the standard Salesforce implementation. So Salesforce has already implemented a lot of things for sales and the service teams to use. So that all comes under the sales and service applications and the standard and custom objects, how you can leverage those things which are out of the box present in Salesforce. So uh, if you see all these three, they cover the major section of your exam, and what you need to get is like 65% of score. So you have 60 questions and you need to get 39 out of them right. Maybe like targeting 40 questions to be right, at least you are sure that they are right, so that gives you a confidence when you are giving the exam. You can keep a note and those things. And these are just more information like the fees and the retake fees. So I'll try to give, these are the focus points which I have sent, and what I try to focus on exam is like out of that 20%. So that 20% you should know in and out completely. So this is the major, like the priority one, I would say, for your examination, that you should know the security of Salesforce in depth, because that's something at the bottom line of the whole Salesforce implementation. So anything you do, you need to understand it from the Salesforce security model perspective, and then answer that question, that will that be applicable based on that security thing or not. And the second part which comes is the data management, process automation, reports and dashboard, because these are the tools which you will use to customize the application overall. And then the last is the standard implementation. So out of that also, if you go through in detail the platform and understand what the platform is, how Salesforce has built the whole platform, understanding what are the standard objects, what are the custom objects, uh, and how they are interconnected. So standard objects, if you understand them very well, you can answer those sales and service application questions based on your knowledge of CRMs, like how CRM application works, like leads, case, how they should flow. Based on those understanding and knowing how the platform is, you can answer those questions. So if you try to cover for this 62% in detail and depth, you'll be able to answer these as well, and try to clear your exam. So today we'll talk in detail about the security model and the security topics what we have in Salesforce. So these are the bullet points which tells you what are basically basically the exam is looking for you. So it is trying to find that you can identify what are the various steps to maintain the users, how to activate, deactivate users, and what are the scenarios when to do what, and various security controls which are in place, like sharing model, territories, teams, those things. And then use of the profiles and permission set, when to use profile, when to use permission set, and then some security associated with the reports and dashboard and templates, those things, like out of the basic security model, what are the different security features. So you need to understand all these points. Talking about the security access in detail, so how Salesforce security is arranged. So they have arranged the security of the Salesforce is in an onion peel model, that you need to go in deeper to access something. So for instance, if you want to access any of the record in Salesforce, first you need to have access to the outer level, that is the organization. So first you need to have ability to log in into the organization, that you can access the Salesforce environment. Then inside layer is the object. So you should have access to those objects. So objects are basically accounts, contacts, leads, so all those objects. So you should have access to those objects. And then for that particular object, there will be multiple records, that is the data. So like there are different companies and the customers you have in your organization. So you should have access to those customers and contacts. So those are the record level access. And finally, on that record, there can be multiple columns and the fields. So those are your column information, field level information, detail, granular details. So that comes at the last level. So this way, and you can control the security at every point with different tools in place. So we'll start from the outermost layer, which is the organization. So on the outermost layer, we can control the access based on trusted IPs, login IP range, login hours, and these all are associated with users. So we'll see them also in detail, what they are and how they act. And then at the object level, what you have is access to that object is controlled by the profile and permission set, like the create permission, create, read, edit, and delete. So these are the four access permissions you have for a particular object, that you can create records for that particular object. You can view the existing data, edit the existing data, or delete the existing data. So these all permissions you give on the profile and the permission set level. We'll see what profile and permission set is. And then you have the license. So Salesforce users, you need to assign a license, and there is a always cost associated with the license. So different licenses give you different access to standard objects. So all the standard objects are segregated based on the license. Like if you have a chatter license user, he will have only access to the chatter objects, and he can post chatters and those things in Salesforce, and he will not have access to the standard objects like account, contact, and those things. So so first level is license. Always that if you don't have the permission on the license level to access those objects, you cannot give even those permission on the profile. So that way you can control. Then third level is the record. So record is the most detail, or that's the data level sharing. So that is the detail and the more complex one, which has lot of rules and things in place to handle them, where you have OWD, which is the org wide defaults for a particular object, that all the records for that particular object, how they behave. We'll see that these also in detail. Then we have role hierarchy. We can set up role hierarchies uh, for the managers and their subordinates, and how they can share data between their role hierarchy. Then you have sharing rules. So you can create some rules to share data between each other. And then you can create teams and then do manual sharing. So these teams also share data between each other in the team. And then manual sharing is like one off, you want to share something with somebody, you can do one off sharings. And then last is the field level, that is the FLS and page layout. So FLS is like a short form of field level security. So field level security is kind of a permission called read and edit. So you can give read and edit permission at the field level, and that is also given on the profile and the permission set level. So you can give a particular profile that he can read these fields or he can edit those fields. And last is the page layouts. So there are always a record will have a different page layout. So you can create multiple page layouts or layout on which you add all those fields, and you can assign those page layouts to different profile and different users so that they see different layout, and on that layout you expose only those fields which you want them to see. So that way also you can control the access. So let's talk about the organization access first. So this is basically access to the user. So how they can enter into Salesforce. So assuming this is your Salesforce environment and you have different users, so you can make the users active, inactive. So you can control them with the access by the active flag. So once the user is active, then only he can log in into Salesforce. If it is inactive or frozen, he will not be able to access the org. There's a slight difference between inactive and frozen. So if you keep the user frozen, you can make maybe use that inactive user or the frozen user to uh, have the access to some, if you have some setup process where it is using those user for some updates. So in like a workflow update or some, that user is being used as a support user. So in your case support setting, there is a support user, and if that user is particular support user which basically updates that record whenever that action happens. So at that time you can frozen the user, and by the time you get a replacement and you change that user in Salesforce, by that time you can keep it frozen and then inactivate once that is done. But once you inactivate, it will break any existing process where that user is being used for any processes. So that's the difference between inactive and frozen. Then the user will have these three things. So a user can have a profile. Role is an optional, so you can have a role and you can not have role. So the users which doesn't have role, they are like a out of the hierarchy. So you can create a hierarchy in Salesforce that is called role hierarchy, where you can decide who is the manager, who is the subordinate, and so on in the role hierarchy, and assign users to that particular role in that hierarchy. And if you don't want, you can keep the user as standalone as well, but the profile is always mandatory for a user, and that decides what all access he get. uh, then you have permission set or many permission set, so you can assign one or many permission set to a user. So that gives some additional permissions on top of profile. So profile is something which gives basic access or base access you define for that particular user, and then if you want to give some add-on access, in that scenario you create a permission set. Assuming like you have a profile called marketing user, and there are 6 users in your marketing team, and out of that 6 users there are 2 people who also does some of support job. So they also take care of sending out replying to the cases and those things when the user responds. So for those 2 users you cannot assign them to service profile. They need to be in marketing profile because they do the marketing as their primary job, but for secondary job they also take care of those cases. So you need to assign them access to case object and ability to some of run of some flows and those things. So that what you can do is you can create a service access permission set and give to those 2 users who are part of that marketing profile, so they will have additional access on top of their profile. Now coming to this login r login IP restriction. So on the profile you can define that what are the login hours for that particular profile. So the user will only be able to log in into Salesforce during that time and not outside of that time. Then you have IP restrictions. So you can define IP ranges through which the user can log in. If the user tries to log in outside of that IP range, it will be blocked and he will not be able to log in. And there are also trusted IP ranges. So you can define your org's trusted IP range. So what happens in what is the use of the trusted IP is that when a user is trying to log in Salesforce and he doesn't have a login IP restriction, anything defined for this login IP, it means he can log in from any IP. In that scenario, if you have the trusted IP set, user will be able to log in without any secondary authentication into Salesforce. But if we log in from outside of those trusted IP, it will the Salesforce will send an confirmation code on the email, and user need to enter that confirmation code to enter into Salesforce. So that helps you give you 2-level authentication when user login with outside of those trusted IP, and you don't have any login IP restriction applied. So that's about the organization access. You can control the users, how they can access into your org. Now coming to the object level access. So what we have at the object level is, let's say we have an account object, and we want to control the access for the account, how user access that account. So you have these CRED permissions, so read, create, edit, delete. So on the profile, you have these four permissions which you can give for users to have ability to read, create, edit, or delete the account records. So this permission is on the higher level. That's the object level we are talking. And then comes are the records which are inside that account. So if you compare, this is like a driver's license and the key to that particular car. So basically your profile will have the details, or your profile is kind of your driving license, where it defines that which all objects or which all things you can do. So what all you can do, you can drive a car, you can drive a van, but you cannot drive a bus. So these are something which are defined on your profile level. So that's what we do on the profile level. We give permissions to the objects like account, contact, lead. So you can, what you can do with those objects like read those objects, or you can create records also of those objects. So those are the things which goes in your profile. Then now, if you, let's say you have a license to drive a car, can you drive all the cars in the world? No, right? So that's second level of security which comes in, that what all records of that particular object you can do that action with. So you have read and create permission on your account. So now you can create records, but what about read? You cannot read all the accounts which are there in your organization. You will only have access to those accounts which you own. So by default, you can see or do all the things which are mentioned on your profile to the accounts which you own. So there is always a term called owner. So every record has one field called owner, and in that you populate a user record. So the user who is owner of that record will have full access on that particular record, and he can do everything which his profile allows. So he has access to do everything like create, edit, delete, everything. Then he can do the full access what he has on that record, because he is the owner. But if you are not the owner, you need to have some setup in the security model, that you share those record with those particular user who are not the owner, and then they can leverage the permission which they have on the object profile, that they can read or edit. So if you share the records with the other users who are not owner, they can then read or edit those records as well. So that's like giving your keys to somebody else to let them drive your car. So you are not, you are the owner, but you want others also to drive the car, so then you need to share that with other people. So that's how security works in Salesforce as well. So we'll now see how the records can be shared across vertically, horizontally in the hierarchy, and how they can be shared with other people so that they can do what they have access on their profile. So moving to that. So now, so this is the overall sharing model of Salesforce, how it works. So it always starts with the most restrictive access. So the top level is the most restrictive access, which we'll talk. And as we go down, it will open up the access, and you keep on getting more and more access from any of these methods. And then if you get whatever access you get at the bottom level, that you can do with that particular thing or the record you have. So starting with the topmost thing, which is the profile permission set CRED. So you should always have, uh, sorry, so you should always have what you have on the profile permission set, the CRED access. Then only you can do whatever you have access on the record level. So let's start with taking an example of account. So on the account, you have a profile permission given for create, read, edit, delete. So you have all the permissions on the profile. Now we talk about the OWD. So OWD is always defined for a particular object. For an object, you can define OWD as private, public read only, or public read write. So these are the three different values we have for the OWT. So private means all the records will be uh, only the owners can see their records. Nobody else sees the other records. So all the other records will not be shared by default to anyone. Then you have the public read only. So in this, all the users can at least have the read access to all the records which they don't own. The records they own, they have the full access, but the records which they don't own, they will have public read only or the read access to those records. Then the last one is public read write. So this gives that you can read and edit the records which you don't own. So this is like a read and edit access. So if you set your OWD as public read write, so this means you are giving read and edit permission to all the records to all the people in your org. So then the bottom levels doesn't help you anything. So you don't need to do anything with the role hierarchy, sharing rules, because you have already opened up the access to the maximum level, that is read and edit. So they can do everything with the records of that particular object. So generally, Salesforce security model is designed in such a way that you keep the top levels restrictive. So you will keep the OWD as private, and based on these different tools you have, you open up the access for the users based on the different tools we have. So these are the 4 different tools we have to open up the access, and wherever the user gets the most permissive, it wins. So basically, let's say from the role hierarchy, user is getting read access, and you have created a sharing rule which gives read and edit access. So then finally the user will have read and edit both. So the most permissive access will be granted to that particular user based on the whole security model. So starting from the OWD, let's say OWD is private, then you set up your role hierarchy. So you have the manager at the top, and then subordinates which are falling under him. And then the subordinate, if subordinate creates a record, so when the subordinate creates a record, he will have the full access, right? Because the subordinate will be the owner of that particular record. So so owner always have the full access of the record because he is the owner. So his access rolls up to the hierarchy. So whenever if somebody is having access to a particular records which are below your role hierarchy, the access will go above the hierarchy uh, in the Salesforce system. So that is the sharing model which rolls up data upwards. So role hierarchy always shares the access upwards to the manager. So you set up your role hierarchy in such a way that if somebody uh, at the bottom level is having some access, it should roll up to the managers, and they should also be able to see those records, and whatever the permission the subordinate has, the same access goes up to the managers. And to do that, you need to just check one checkbox, that is grant access using hierarchies checkbox. So there will be a checkbox when you set OWD. So you will set the OWD as private, and there would be a small checkbox called grant access using hierarchies for that particular object. Once you check that checkbox, grant access using hierarchies, the role hierarchy sharing starts for that particular object, and whatever you have set up the role hierarchy, it works. And basically always that's the ideal scenario, that you don't set your role hierarchy same as your organization hierarchy, because not always you want all the data to roll up to some people who are on the top on the hierarchy because of some scenario, and they don't want to see, they should not see the data. So in that way you decide your role hierarchy based on the sharing of the data and not based on your organization's hierarchy. So that's one thing. And then sharing rules. So sharing rules are particularly a tool in Salesforce to share data vertically or any way around. So diagonally, vertically, to anyone. So sharing rules basically works on two different things. One is ownership based and one is criteria based. So ownership based is the one in which, let's say, you decide that if the records are owned by one user, they should be shared by another user. But in Salesforce, it doesn't works with the one user, it works with the group of users. So always the ownership thing works with based on the group of users. So what you can do in Salesforce, you can create public group. So there is a term called public group. So you can create a group of users and put those users in that public group. So every users who are part of particular role. So in Salesforce, you can assign a role to a user, right? So all the users which belong to particular role is also a public group. So users with role called sales managers, users with role sales associates. So all those are public group in Salesforce. So all users which belong to public group, you can use that public group and then share um, the records which are owned by anyone in that public group to all the users who are in another public group. So from one public group to another public group. So in that way, uh, data gets shared between across the role hierarchy, right? Um, is that clear? Any questions if from anyone? I think this very important part of the role hierarchy. If you have any questions, I can maybe draw something and explain. Okay. So that is for the sharing between the different uh, public groups. So that's for the sharing rule. And then another scenario where you don't know that they would be owned by whom, but you know for sure that the records will have some particular criteria. So let's say the record have some criteria like account rating is high. So all those records which are having high account rating should be shared with the sales manager. So the sales manager should always see those accounts which are with high rating, and maybe for some under there can be a flag called under supervision. So they should be taken care by the sales manager. They should always see those data. So if any criteria gets met for that particular record, they gets quickly shared with a set of users. So you can again share with a public group. So again, there you can create another public group and share those records with that particular group of users. Here itself, I would like to also talk about a term called queue. So in Salesforce, we also have a term called queue, which is similar to public group. So that also contains group of users. So you can create a queue in Salesforce, which is group of users. And then that queue can become owner of a record. So when uh, you can create a queue which is specific to an object. So let's say we created a queue for cases and called it a tier 1 support queue. And then you can assign a record to tier 1 support queue. Then all the members who are part of tier 1 support will be able to access that record. All members or all the users of that queue will have full access to that particular case. So that's basically when we do the workload management. So you assign all the cases to a tier 1 support queue. So all the members who are in tier 1 support queue will be able to see that record. And once the user start working on it, he picks from that queue and assign to himself. So he changed the owner from queue to himself, and then only that user will have access and he will keep working on it. So that way you can control uh, to the workload management using those queues. So queues are same as public group, but they are always object specific and can be assigned only to those objects for which you create them. So that's about the queues. Then coming to next is the team access. So in Salesforce, you can create teams. Uh, so basically the teams are available for account, opportunity, and case objects. So for these three objects, you can create teams, and then you can share the data across the team. So in team you have let's say 5 members. So you give all the 5 member into that team, and they can share the records between that team. So when once any one of the team member has any account as their owner, the record gets shared with the rest of the team members as well. And in the team, when you define the team, you can also define at what level you want to share, like you want to share as a read only or the read edit, and you can do that. Then last one is territory hierarchy. So territory hierarchy is basically uh, so one, you have the role hierarchy, and if you want a separate hierarchy out of role hierarchy and want the data to be shared based on that as well, that is generally for sales. You want like kind of a area wise, you want to agents to work on different areas. So you have separated your whole territory into different regions, like uh, Arizona and then Canada. So all those sales rep will have that particular territory assigned to them. So user has a territory assigned to them, and also the records, the account record will have a territory assigned. So this firm belongs to a particular territory, and the user also belong to that territory. Then the records get shared with that particular user based on the matching territory which they have. And also you can define the opportunity and contact access when you define the territory. So all the contacts or opportunities which are linked to that firm get also shared with the territory. So you should know about the territory hierarchy also. I think you might get some question on the territories. So that's the all different tools we have for sharing a model in Salesforce. Uh, I think I just wanted to cover one more point which I missed. So there is a view all and modify all permission on the profile level as well. So this permission basically is for data access. So the CRED access, CRED, create, read, edit, delete. So these on the profile are for the object level access, but view all and modify all is again the record access given on profile. So this always overrides anything on the OWD role hierarchy, anything there. So if you give a view all access on the profile, then the users who are part of that profile, if you give view all for the account, they can see all the accounts for that in the organization, irrespective of whatever sharing model you set. So it doesn't matter whatever you have set on the OWD, even if it is private, but the profile gives him view all. So always that profile permission comes on the topmost level. So you have ability to give that view all and modify all. So modify all is for read and edit, and view all is for just read access for all the data in the particular object. And there is one more permission which is on the profile only, which is called view all data, modify all data. So that is kind of for all the objects throughout the org. So generally that is given to system admins so that they can see all the data in Salesforce. So that is on the profile level out of the object setting. So it's like general admin settings where you give view all data or modify all data, so then they can see the records of all the objects in throughout the org. So that's also one setting on the profile which you can give. So I think that's all for the security model. I tried to cover most of the things in the security model. Any questions from anyone before we jump into talking about any other topics in certification preparation?
Hi, Nishant.
Yep.
Yeah, can you just talk about a little bit more about that user when it is inactive and frozen? I'm still a bit not able to get the right use that. What is the difference between inactive and frozen?
Yeah, so basically inactive frees up your license. So when you inactivate a user, it
Hmm.
frees up your license, and when till it is frozen, it will still consume your license, and it is not completely out of your organization. You can
Okay.
use that user in the system process. Like you have a case support setting, and in the case support setting, you need to define a user, automated user, with which the records get updated. So whenever an assignment rule happens, it updates some of the record criteria. Then last modified name would be that particular user which you give in the
Hmm.
support setting. And let's say you have that user which you are inactivating in that support setting. So until you change that user in your processes, background processes, you keep it frozen. So in that way, it consumes your license. User cannot log in into system, but your internal system things doesn't fail. So those processes still keep on running, and they don't fail the processes which you have in your system. And once you replace that user in your all your processes, like the support setting and those things, you can mark it inactive so that it frees up your license as well.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Okay,
I understand now. Okay. Thanks.
cool. Okay, so this was about security model. Um, Now we'll talk about standard and custom object. So I think the standard and custom object, you need to understand, like here you need to understand what the whole Salesforce platform is, how it is designed, and and how the various sales and support applications. So though it is overall 40% of the exam weightage, but if you try to understand
Hey
well
Nishant,
in, yeah, hi Shankar.
Nishant, sorry to interrupt. I see a couple of questions in the chat before we move to the next topic.
Okay, okay, there are in
Suppose.
the chat. Let's take that. So I was able to join. It's true that SF stopped being with profile and only continue with permissions. I hear something like that. That was on roadmap. How can you view dependent workflows from user? Okay. So first thing on the profile and continue with permission set, I don't think profiles can be stopped completely, but yeah, Salesforce recommends using permission set because that way, if you go in detail when you design the whole system as an whole, what you think is when permission sets are something which you can give on an app level, or when you try to modularize your code structure. So let's say I'm breaking bit of my whole big organization into small pieces, and I'm modularizing my code structure. So what I can do for that particular module or a particular package I give permissions via a permission set. So that way you can control access to those object and level things in the permission set, and the overall profile level will always contain those permissions, like he can access the reports or not, flows and those things. And permission sets are more easily deployable also using the various new tools like Salesforce DX and those things, so you can manage them very well using those deployments and those things. So it is always handy to use permission sets if you can modularize your whole code structure into smaller chunks. So permission sets help you break down your bigger profile level permissions into smaller things and assign them. And also now Salesforce has introduced permission set groups. So what you can do is you can group all the permission sets into a bigger permission set group and just assign that to a particular user. And whenever you have new permissions coming up for that particular group, just add that permission to that group. And then all the users which have that permission set group will get those permissions that was recently released in the summer 20. So those things are there in the roadmap, but I don't think completely profile will be stopped. I didn't hear anything about that. How can you view dependent workflows from user before setting him or her inactive? Um, I think you can check in the metadata dependencies, maybe when you try to deactivate, but uh, I'm really not sure if there is some direct tool. It would be something because when you design the systems, you know who is doing what. Maybe you need to find out based on your understanding of the org. Okay, thanks. So let's move to the next topic. So we'll try to cover uh, standard and custom objects. I'll just have a quick time check. Okay. So in standard and custom objects, what we have is different. You need to understand the platform, how it is, sales and service applications. If you know how the platform is designed, you can able to answer those questions very well. So to understand that, you should understand the three things majorly how Salesforce arranges its all data model. So you have the object level first, and then on the object you have different record types, and then you have page layout. So there would be a lot of questions around these three topics: object, record type, page layout, which to use when, which to. So you should always know that which scenario you will create a new object, and in which scenario you should have two different record types of that particular object. So on the object is the kind of your, if you compare it with an Excel, you can consider the object as a sheet in your Excel. And then that object contains various fields, which are your columns in that particular Excel sheet, and then the data is your rows. So that way you have your object. And then record type is segregating the data into two different groups. So when you want, there are different group of users who work on different type of opportunities. So there are opportunity, let's say talk about opportunity, and there are different type of opportunity. So there are sales opportunity, there are retention opportunity, and you want to segregate your business processes which work separately on those two. You have different pick list values to be displayed. Stage values are different for that particular opportunity. And if you want to segregate the uh, business process and split out that opportunity into different groups, then you create different record types on top of it. And then with that record type, you can show different pick list values, the sales path, those things you can split based on the business processes. And then you can create page layouts. So page layouts are always for the different record types. So one record type can have multiple page layouts, uh, or which are like given to the profile. So there is always page layout which controls what fields you display on that um page layout for that particular record type, and then what are the fields which are marked as required to be entered on the page layout, which are just read only fields. So all those things you can control on the page layout. And the page layouts are also linked with the profile. So record type, profile, and the page layout. So page layout is kind of junction between your record type and the profile, which you use to control the fields and those visibility. So that's one. And then you should also understand about objects and relationships, how the standard objects are lined up in Salesforce, how campaigns and leads. So these are unlinked objects, but you basically create always a campaign, and then from that campaign you generate some leads, and then those leads get converted. So you have the lead conversion in place in Salesforce by default, which converts the lead into account and contact. And optionally, if you want, you can create an opportunity as well. And then these are the linking. So account will have contact and opportunity as child, and the account can also have cases. So these are for the service application. So if you focus on the sales part, that is account, contact, opportunity, and the leads. And for service, you have case. So mainly in the admin exam, you will get questions around these objects, and also products and price books. So how to handle those things. So when in the opportunity, you will be selling something. So overall, what we are doing here is to sell a product. So always that will also be their product and the price books. So these are the various objects you should try to understand how they are built in Salesforce out of the box, and what things you can do without customizing anything. We'll see some of the out of the box process automation as well when I go forward. Then you have validation rules in Salesforce. You can enforce some data validation to make sure it maintains all the quality, and user doesn't enter bad data. Like if you have set up a rule that percentage should be less than 20, so then it will throw an error when user tries to enter 25% as a discount percentage and those things. I'll be going fast. I'll not cover all the things in detail. If you have any question, just keep posting it on the chat, and then we'll take it in the last question answer sessions, because I had my mind to just focus on the security in detail, and I will just go through other topics. I will highlight what things to be studied, and I will also post some guides and links there in the end, which you can go through on the trailhead and read all these topics in detail, in depth there, and maybe we'll have some sessions in future. Then we have workflow process automation, which is the very important part, which will be always a tool underlying in all the questions. So you should always understand there would be scenario based questions, what tool to use, which tool can help you do that, and which the best tool which the admin should suggest the users to do that, particularly in that particular scenario. And so for that, you have workflows, process builders, approval process. You should understand what are these, and what are different features you get when you choose one another over. Then you have some standard automation built in Salesforce for lead and case objects. So you should know what are those, and you should always try to leverage those standard automations instead of creating your own. So what automations are already present for lead and case, if you suggest answer by doing workflow or a process builder, then it would go wrong, because already Salesforce has provided some automations for lead and case. So those standard automation tools, you should know what are there. There are some which are very small ones, but like big deal alert, dashboard notification. So these are very small things, but they will come up in the scenario questions, and you should not take them as like a vague answer or something, but these are small things which you should know. What are the standard automations in Salesforce? So talking about what we have in Salesforce as automation. So first one is workflow rules, which is the old one where we had ability to do these 4 actions. So you can create tasks, send out email alerts, field updates, and outbound messages based on some criteria. So you create some criteria like created, edited, and edited to subsequently meet the criteria. And then you put your rule criteria, that is your actual criteria, that how much, if the amount of opportunity is greater than 1000, let's say, then these actions happen. So there would be some immediate actions, and then you can have time triggered as well. So you can do that actions after a particular time is passed. So those things also you can do. Then what you have is, so these are the workflow rules, which was earlier old tool which was there, it's still there. And then you have process builder, which is more advanced tool, which gives you all of these features, and also give you some more features on top of those what were there in workflow. So this is the layout of process builder, where you can define multiple step criterias, and then you have the immediate action, schedule action. So you can create a whole flow out here, In workflow, there was only one rule criteria and the things to be done. That's it. But here you can design the whole flow if else conditions, which keeps on checking, and then you can do different actions based on that. So that's the whole layout for a process builder, where you have these all action groups, actions, objects, and those things. uh, Main important thing to understand and to keep in mind is what are the difference between the workflow and process builder and what you can do. So in workflow, we have these four things to do: create, task, update a field, email alert, outbound message. Whereas in process builder, you get out, apart from these, you get option to create a whole record. So you can create a new record itself. You can update any related records. So you can update the child or parent records for that particular object where you started the process builder. You can use quick actions, which you define in Salesforce, to create record, update, log a call, all those things. You can launch flows. Flows are also automation tool, which gives you ability to input the screens as well. But when you call it from process builder, you can't call the screen based flows, but you can call the non-screen based, which are the auto launched flows. So you can call them from here to do more complex uh, process logic. And if there are even more complex things, you can even call the code, which is the apex. So background processing, you can call the apex methods to do some process for you. You can submit for approvals and call another process from a process. All those things you can do. What point to be noted is you cannot do outbound message in process builder by default, which was there in workflow. Outbound message is basically sending a message to a third party system. So like how we send an email, so email is always sent to a person. Similarly, if you want to notify a system, like from Salesforce, you want to notify Oracle or SAP system that these are the changes which happened in Salesforce, please do needful in your end. So those things are the outbound message, which are SOAP messages. That doesn't supported in process builder. You cannot directly create outbound message, but what you can do instead is you can use the apex to send out those soap messages from the apex and those things. So that's about the difference between workflow and process. um, Very important, cases and leads. What are the standard automation there in Salesforce? So there are different automation in Salesforce to input and do action on the cases and lead. So for cases and lead, to input the data from the web form or website, you have web to case and web to lead. So that helps you take input from a website where you have exposed a form. So a support form can be web to case, and inquiry form can be a web to lead. So those things you can take to data input. And then you have email to case. So somebody sends an email to a support email, then it creates a case in your Salesforce system automatically. So that is email to case. Then once the things are there in Salesforce, you can set up various auto response rules. So these are for generally for these automated case and lead creation. So if you want the user who sent this lead or case to be notified that we are working on it, the case is there, you can use the auto response rule to send the email notification to that particular user that we got your case and we are working on it. So that thing can be done using auto response rules. Then you have assignment rules. So once the case comes in, you need to see what criteria does it met, and then you need to assign it to particular queue or a user. So generally we'll use queues to route the workload to particular set of people. So for case, you can create a tier 1, tier 2 support queues and then assign it to them, and then they can start working on it, picking things from there, and you can work on them. So that's for assignment rules. So moving forward, we have escalation rules. That is only for cases. So in cases, we also have already feature called escalation. So if the case is sitting in a queue for a particular time, like 4 hour or more, it should be escalated to tier 2. So it is sitting in the tier 1 for more than 4 hours and its type of product support, it should be escalated to tier 2, and an email should be notified to manager or somebody. So those things you can do in Salesforce by default by using escalation rules. So you should know about that as well. Then in escalation rule, there is a point called early triggers. You generally get question about that early trigger. So that is something, um, a checkbox in the support settings, which controls that if you are setting, let's say, I'll go with an example. So let's say this is the time frame. Salesforce always evaluates the cases in 15 minute time frame. So the case got created at 12:05, and there is an escalation rule that after 1 hour the case should be escalated. So it will not be escalated at 12 o'clock timestamp because the case is not yet created. At 12:15 it is just 10 minutes for that case to get created, and so on. It goes on checking for every 15-minute interval, and it gets escalated at 1:15. So the case got escalated at 1:15 because at 1 o'clock it was only 55 minutes old and not completely 1 hour, and it got escalated at 1:15 where it was 10 minutes over the time, so 1 hour 10 minutes, but then it got escalated here. So in these scenarios, what can happen is your SLAs can break. So if you have a SLA agreement with your business that we will be able to respond to you within an hour, and if this escalation failed, your SLA might break. So what you can do is you can set early trigger. So if you set the early trigger, what Salesforce will do, Salesforce will trigger the escalation at 1 o'clock itself, even if it is 55 minutes old only at that time, because Salesforce will check that when you enable early trigger, it will see if it is escalating at the next interval. So if it is escalating at the next interval, it will do now itself. So those are small checks in Salesforce to make sure the SLA breach doesn't happen in those scenarios. Next, coming to data management. So there are different tools to manage the data in Salesforce. You should know what are the different tools, when you can use which one, and then how to do the data backup. So for data backup, you have different tools. You can export data from uh, export wizards. There is a Salesforce inbuilt weekly backup service. So you can enable that, and it keeps backing up data into a local in Salesforce, and you can download it from there. So that is also there. You should check those all things as well. Then I'll come to talking about the tools, which we have main two tools on which you will get questions, like the data import wizard and the data loader. So these are the two major tools um, which we can use to import data into Salesforce and manage data. Import wizard is an inbuilt tool which is inside Salesforce. You can launch this wizard from Salesforce itself. Inside it, if you go into setup and look for data import wizard, you will find this, and you can just launch wizard and you can upload data from there. Only the things to note are these things. So first is the objects which are supported by data import wizard. So data import wizard supports custom objects, contacts, campaign, leads, accounts, and solution. Maybe a short abbreviation to remember this is CC class. So CC class is a short abbreviation you can use to remember this, and only these objects are supported. If the question comes like we should use for the case object, then no, we cannot use for the import wizard. You need to think through. I'll give that example once I finish the both. Then you should see the number of records. So it should be always less than 5,000 records. Then only the import wizard
And
works.
hi, Nishant. Luke
Yep.
here. Sorry to interrupt you. It's less than 50,000 for the import wizard.
Okay.
Just in case people think
Yeah.
otherwise. Yeah, maybe it's a typo. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, 50,000 records. So that's for the import wizard. And then it can stop workflow rules and prevent duplicates during import. You can also use duplicates, prevent the duplicate records to be inserted. So this is a by default feature which comes in with the import wizard, which is not available for the data loader. But data loader gives you more flexibility to do imports for all the objects. You can use any standard or custom object and do the import for data objects, and then you can import data for up to 5 million and even more. But like it's an optimal uh, thing which you should do. If you have more than that records, you should either break them up or use a data migration service or some integration jobs which run at the back end to do those things under the hood. Then you have schedule import. So you can schedule the data loader with a command line. So you can create a command line job which runs basically to do your data import. So you can create that, run the data loader from a command line and do those things. You can do the mappings and save those mappings for future, and reuse those mappings in the future as well. And you can also export or delete data which is not available in import wizard. So you can export the data as well and also delete the data. So let's say now a scenario question comes up that the user wants to make sure that duplicates cases are not loaded, and he has less than 5,000 records and need to import the data. So all the scenarios will meet. Maybe for the launch wizard, like it should make sure that it doesn't insert the duplicates and the records are also less than 5,000. And you might think that, okay, I should go with data import wizard, but then case objects are not supported with data import wizard. So this way you need to rule out each and every conditions which are supported for that particular tool, and then answer your question that which tool would be the best for that particular scenario. So that's for the data management, data import. Then the last topic is the analytics, which is the reports and dashboards. So you should always need to have those things in place to export the data and show some graphs and charts to the higher management, that how the things are working, how they're reporting. So you should understand which type of reports and what to use for a particular implementation scenario. And then you should also understand what is the impact of the sharing model. So how the sharing model gonna impact your reports. So if the data is not shared with somebody and you created a report and gave them link to that particular report, and when that user runs that report, he will only see the data which he has access to. He will not see all the records there. So you need to understand that. And then you should also understand how you can share the report. So for report sharing, you have folders in Salesforce. So in Salesforce, you can create different folders and put reports in that particular folder and share that folder with particular user or group of users, and they have access to those reports based on the folder access. And the same goes for the dashboard as well. So for dashboard, you can create dashboard folders and put the dashboards in that dashboard folder, and then they can see those dashboards. So that's about the sharing model for there. And then what are the different options they can do. So that also comes with that access which you can define. And lastly, you have the report types. So you should understand what are the different report types and which to use when. So I'll try to talk about a bit on them now. So first we talk about reports. So the first thing which comes for the report is the report type. So report type defines what all objects are involved in that particular report which you're going to create. So what all data comes in, and depends on the report type. So let's say if you create a report type which is account with contacts. So in that scenario, you can bring account contacts, account and the contacts in that particular report, and no other objects will be available in that report, even if they are linked to accounts. So you need to choose the report type appropriately, that it gives you all the objects of the data, related data which you want in the Salesforce. And report type will always have uh, there are two types, like standard and custom. So standard report types are basically provided by Salesforce, which are inner join of all the object you say. So if you create a account contact in Salesforce, so inner join of account and contact is available by default as a report type, which you can use. So that is basically all the accounts which are linked with a contact, or all the contacts which have accounts associated with them. So that report type is already available in Salesforce. But if you want to create a report in which you want to see accounts irrespective of the contact, like if they are with or without contact, that kind of scenario, outer join kind of scenario, then you need to go for custom report types, and you need to define them in the custom report type, and then you can use them in the reports. So once you select the report type, it will pull the data from that particular object or the related objects, and then you define various filtering on the data. So once you get the report type, it gives you all the data there, and then you define what are the different filtering. So first comes is the scope. So in that scope, you define the time frame of the records, like you can choose any date time field on that particular object and select a time frame, like uh, what are the last month or last week, last year, uh, or next week. Anything you can set as a time frame there, and then it will show only the records for that particular time frame. And also you can set the ownership filter, so the records which are only mine. So you can select my accounts, or you can say all accounts. So that way you can restrict or open up those filters for the ownership. Then you have columns, which all columns to be displayed, or the fields which you want in the particular report, so you can put those fields there. Then you have grouping. So this is most important part of the reporting. So grouping is something which helps you define different summarization or table structure you can create. So first, by default, is the tabular structure in Salesforce. Then if you do a grouping on the rows, it becomes a summary report. And at max, you can do 4 level of grouping there for summary. And then I think three level of grouping you can do for the summary max. Then you have matrix. So matrix report is where you do grouping on the summary, on the row as well as column. So when you do grouping at the row and the column both, then it becomes a matrix report where you have matrix structure, where you have grouping of the categories and grouping of the user, and then you can see for that particular category how many cases this user has solved and those kind of data. And last is the joint report, where you group multiple report types. So if you are not able to pull all the data in a single report type, what you can do, you can use two reports. So you can use two different report types with a common object. So let's say accounts with context, account with opportunities. Then you can group those two reports which you create with two different report types in a joint report with a common object account, and then see the data which is available for that particular um, account. So you will have two reports with the two blocks, with one block having information about account and all the related context, and the second block will have account and the opportunities associated with that particular account. So that way you can see two datas lying sitting together next to each other, and maximum you can have 5 blocks or the 5 reports joined together in a joint report. Then comes filters and logics. So you can add different filters, conditions like field filters. So if the category is high, amount is greater than 5,000, all those things you can put in the filters. And also you can set the filter logic like and or a custom logic like one first condition or with second condition, and those things in the filter logic. Then you can add some charts on the report itself, a summary. When you use summary or matrix report, at that time you can show a chart with the summary data there. And then you have and then you have export facility. You can export the data out from Salesforce in an Excel or CSV format. And then last one is subscribing a report. So you can subscribe to a report so that whatever time you said, like every Monday 5 o'clock, you should get a export of this report as a email. So it will send you a snapshot of that particular report as an email snapshot. I think now in summer 20 you will also get a CSV file of that particular report attached. If you want, you can do that as well now. So that's all you can do for the reports. And then comes the dashboard. So dashboard is something kind of visual representation of all the reports which you have underlying. So you have a lot of reports which you have built underlying, and you want to see uh, them in a visual picture, like a dashboard of a car. So you can see at the quick glance that what is happening at the moment in my car, what speed it is, what is the gear I'm running into, and all those things which you want at a quick glance. You don't want to dig deeper into it and understand why it is happening. Then you can set up some dashboards, so which gives you different representation. Generally in the question in the exam would be around which component to be used. So like this is a uh, Gauss component. So Gauss component is basically to see at what level we are out of the minimum and maximum. And then you have this donut component, which is basically to split out uh, data into some different categories like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, how many. So there are 56 people who are in different active people, 56, and then we want to see out of those 56 which are in phase 1, which are in phase 2, and so on. So that we can do using a donut component. And there are like if it's a time flowing data, like it is varying from the time, like at initial of the month it was 5, and then it's a graph kind of thing, timeline. So that you can use the line chart for those time based conditions, and so on. So you should understand which component to use for which scenario. We generally have question around that as well. And this is the matrix component. So matrix is kind of summary or total value displayed. So these are the metrics component in. So you should understand what all components are there, and these are the basic layout of the dashboard. And you can use multiple reports in a single dashboard. So there is a one dashboard which underlying using different reports. So this is a user sign up report, this is a trailhead user data report, and so on. And you group them all together in a one dashboard. So that's for the dashboards. So that's all about the Salesforce admin certification, which I wanted to focus topics, which I want to talk. Any questions we have at this point before we move to our next phase of today's discussion? We have around 4 or 5 minutes before we move. If there are any questions, is there any on the chat? Okay, there are no questions. So let's move to the next phase of today's discussion. We'll try to talk about real-time experience. So that's what all I talked about is the theoretical things which we should do while learning. But now we'll try to talk to two of our group members, colleagues who recently cleared the Salesforce admin certification. They joined the group in January and February and March, and they have recently cleared their Salesforce admin certification. So we'll try to talk to them and see what are their experiences. So I'll start with basic how was your journey, Luke and Shankar, like to become a Trailblazer, and how you got admin certified. If you want to start with your story.
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Nishant.
Yeah.
Thanks for that actual presentation. That was very good, I think. Very helpful for everyone, I'd say. Well, first off, I started in Primerica in 2017. I began in March 2017, and I was working on Salesforce from August 2017. So I've been in QA since then. So I started the academy in March after talking to my manager, and he basically kind of pushed me down that road, I'd say. So it's been a very good learning experience. Yeah, I think that's everything from how I started, really.
Great. And what about you, Shankar? How you felt this journey? How you started this
Yeah,
part of being Salesforce?
sure. So I was first introduced to Salesforce somewhere in the month of February, and thanks to Pramerica Salesforce Academy for that. Since then, it has nothing but a great journey so far. So I basically find Trailhead a really great learning platform. The bite-sized modules that they have over there are really helpful, and they help basically not to lose interest in the subject. Well, for me, the motivation comes from my desire to learn new things, and I had also won a certification voucher during one of the community events held in Rock Theatre here in America. So
Mm-hmm.
that also kind of motivated me to take up the certification exam.
Okay, great. And how was Trailhead helpful for you both? Like how Trailhead helped you prepare for your certification?
Yeah, I think it was a massive help. So that was the kind of first place I started. So when I was in QA, I always thought, what is going on behind the scenes? I didn't really understand, visibility, who can see this, why are they seeing this when you log in as a user or profile. So definitely Trailhead was brilliant. It got a bit addicting for me, I'd be honest. There was evenings I'd sit there and maybe 2 or 3 hours just constantly passing the modules, and it became nearly a game.
Yeah, it's really a great gamified journey.
Yeah.
Getting through those ranks and getting those badges and points gives you a feel that you are achieving something. Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah, exactly. And it is definitely a very good step in progress, because you kind of start off from the very beginning and it gets harder as you go along. And then you have things like super badges, which are quite time consuming and can be difficult. So yeah, definitely a great help for me.
Yeah. And what kind of trail mix or things which you worked on, kind of which path or which you took in the trailhead? Can you
Yeah.
share?
Yeah, so I started off with your admin trail mix, Nishant, and basically I didn't find out about the super badges until a bit later on, because it was all kind of new to me, and the websites, there's a lot of information there. But yeah, the admin trail mix, and then as I kind of got more invested in the different topics, I started searching, individual topics themselves, like support processes, sales processes, and make sure that I just covered every trail mix nearly that came under that topic. So that was kind of my journey in trail mix itself.
Yeah.
Trailhead.
Great. And what about you, Shankar? What kind
I
of path you
completely
took?
agree with whatever. Yeah, completely agree with whatever Luke and you said. So the Salesforce recommended trail mix on Trailhead is definitely a good thing to pursue, because it will put us in a great position to crack the exam. And also there is a Trailhead quest on the Trailhead website, where you can go and look for the contests that they have, and if you're lucky, you would be able to earn a $200 certification voucher by completing a quest. So quest will be like complete a super badge within a month, or
Yeah.
reach to a Trailhead ranger rank within a month, and you will be put into a random list where
Yeah.
put into a list where a random person will be selected, and they'll be given a certification voucher. So that
Right.
one thing is also very important to look out for on Trailhead.
Great. That's great. Really, Trailhead is very helpful in preparing for any admin exam. I think you can learn a lot of things from anywhere, but Trailhead gives you best thing is the hands-on challenge and hands-on practice things. So you can do the things in your org and see them live when you do. So it helps really well. So talking about the challenging topics or trails, anything which you find very challenging in your whole journey and how you conquered it during this journey.
Yeah, so the data imports is definitely kind of a head scratcher for myself. I think the super badge involved 3 different Excel sheets, and the data was kind of all jumbled together. So I think, Nishant, if you remember, I actually needed your help on passing this one.
Yeah.
So I think we sat for maybe half an hour, and we tried to separate the data in the Excel sheets and make sure that the upload would go through to Salesforce in the way it wanted it. So that was definitely difficult for me. And then security and access itself, I'd say, is probably the most difficult part of Salesforce. That you need to understand kind of how the users, what access each profile needs, or how permission sets kind of work towards a profile, and sharing rules, all them kind of things. So yeah, that's from me.
Yeah. Agree with that. I think security model is underlying everything, so it governs everything, how anything is visible in the Salesforce. That's true. What about you, Shankar? What things you felt more challenging,
I,
and how you conquered
well,
them?
I found the process automation features a bit tricky, just because they come with a lot of features. So sometimes it gets very confusing which automation process we should utilize in order to achieve the task. So there are a bit of nuances that we should be aware of in order to attempt the questions that they come on the exam. So I found those automation processes a bit tricky.
Mhm.
Apart
Yeah, I
from
think they
them, I
become
think,
overwhelming when like they can do this,
yeah,
a lot of things, and
yeah,
you need to, and the scenario, there would be a scenario-based question that you need to pick one and you need to decide if that is available in that process or not. So you should know what are the
exactly.
things which are available and then decide which tool to pick for that particular
Yeah,
scenario in a question. Yeah, yeah,
that's right.
great. Anything else you prepared outside of Trailhead? Anything you did for your exam outside of Trailhead learning?
Yeah. So I found a course on Udemy, Mike Wheeler's Salesforce Certified Admin course. Uh, it was a really good course. Now he split every topic into a different section, and it was very easy to follow. Small kind of 10-minute videos on each mini topic in that there. And I think, Nishant, you said that courses on Udemy can be redeemed through Degreed.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something I think everyone should do, because it's nice to get a break from trail mix as well, and kind of listen to somebody. And I suppose that's how I learn better, is listening and kind of getting guidance from somebody else rather than just reading constantly. So I also used ProPros flashcards. So that was kind of in the last few weeks as I was preparing for the admin exam. So the flashcards are kind of just small questions that might come up on your exam, and they give you the answer straight away. So that's a good resource there. And then definitely the Salesforce help pages. So on the help pages themselves, they talk about considerations and limitations of their features in Salesforce. So let's say data upload, or transferring a lead into a contact or an account or opportunity, things like that there, where on the exam you will probably get a few questions on what can and can't be done on Salesforce platform itself. So that the considerations and limitations are definitely something to think about. And I'd say that'd be one of the last kind of subjects to cover if you are going for the admin exam.
Yeah, the help articles are really in-depth detail of any tool platform you want. So you can just write any tool name, whatever you are looking for, and just write help.salesforce.com. So that will contain a detailed documentation of that particular tool, which you can refer to understand what is there. Yeah, agree. And what about you, Shankar? Any things you want to share?
Yeah.
Things which you prepared?
Yeah, so just like Luke, I also did a course on Udemy. So
Mhm.
I did a course by Francis Pindar. It really helped me revise the concepts after I had completed the admin trail mix. And there is also a mock test at the end of that course, which was really great. So
Mhm.
it basically gave, exam kind of situation for me, and I
Mhm.
was able to see what kind of questions appear during the exam and how to tackle them. So that was really good. I also took around 2 to 3 mock tests that we get free online. So one was from Salesforce Ben, and one more from Simply Learn. So that
Mhm.
also really helped. And I attended certification days webinar, which is conducted by Salesforce. So I
Yeah.
think if people are who are looking forward to take the exam can definitely attend that webinar, because they discuss the topics in detail, and they touch on the topics from where we can get questions during the
Right.
exam. So
Right. Right. Agree.
And Shankar, just to follow up on your certification days, you also get a $100 coupon at the end of that webinar. So I think it's 5 hours long, and then they give you the coupon. So it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think
sure.
I agree with that. You should try that webinar. It's just 5 hours of thing, but in that 5 hours, it will cover each and every topic which might come in the exam. And it's kind of good revision. If you are gonna give exam, you can take that certification day webinar a week before or so, to just brush up on everything, and then you have that voucher as well to just get register for the exam, apply that $100 voucher, and then give the exam. I will put all these links which we are talking about, like the Udemy course links and the certification webinar, in a guide. I have already created that. I will give you link end of this session, so you can go there and look onto those links and see if these are helpful for you. Um, Talking more about like Salesforce topics. So what are the things which like you planned for preparation? Like what are the easy things which you picked, or you tried to pick the hard topics? How you uh, pick the topics to get a good positive score? What was your planning?
Yeah, I think for easy topics, it's definitely something everyone should consider is like the company info page, basically memorizing what is on that page. So if you just go into setup and type company information into the quick find, you'll get that page, and easy marks can be found here, and it's a great confidence booster, I found, to just memorize something as simple as that. And there usually is a question or two on the exam about the company info page. And then something else was the user profile page. So if you typed, let's say, your own name into Salesforce and just opened your own page, memorizing what is on that page. So like the checkboxes, let's say marketing user, that's
Yeah.
something can
I think
definitely.
there's always question for the marketing user, because
Yeah.
marketing user is a feature license. So there are feature licenses which comes with these checkboxes on user record, like knowledge user, marketing user, offline user. So these are the feature licenses which comes top of your actual Salesforce license, which have some additional cost associated. And based on that checkboxes, you get some more permission in Salesforce. Like if you have the marketing user checkbox, then only you can create campaigns in Salesforce. Even if you have read create permission on your profile with campaigns, but still you would not be able to create campaigns until you have that marketing user checkbox checked. And I think we have one question on that coming up. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And then I also found that support processes and sales processes, there's a ton of trail mixes to do on that. So it's definitely the first time I actually sat my exam, I had a few questions on support processes, and that threw me off big time. So support process is definitely one. I think some of them features are pretty new to Salesforce as well. So definitely something to look into.
Yeah, and I think the certification days webinar also, when you join, they will also talk about the new features and which might come into the new release question. So whenever the new release comes in, the questions will have dependency based on the new features, so that the answer gets changed based on the new feature, and then you need to think of that new feature also in your mind when answering that question. So yeah. Anything from you, Shankar, about this topics?
No, that's all. I think you guys covered it well. I just wanted to add one thing. Data management and security are the two topics from where we can expect tricky questions. But if we grasp those topics correctly, I think there'll be easy pickings during the
Mhm.
exam.
Yeah, I think that's why I try to split them into three parts. The first is the security, which is the most important, which underlies everything. Then comes second part, which is the tools, process automation, and data management. Those things, which are kind of things that Salesforce has given you to implement, and you should know them, when to use which and how, those things. And then third comes is the standard custom object sales support processes, which is the standard out of the box Salesforce which they have built and given you, and you should know that what they have capabilities there, so that you leverage them without creating anything from the point number two. So you should understand overall these three in a, they all come like interlocked with each other. You should understand them interlocked how they are, and then that helps. And any strategy for answering the questions? Anything like how you went through during your exam? What was your strategy during your exam?
Yeah. So reading the question at least twice, because I find the questions are worded pretty difficultly. They can kind of throw you off just by the wording itself. So definitely read the question at least twice. And then what I found was thinking security as your priority. So what makes the most sense in terms of security for the answer itself. Then I found removing obvious incorrect answers. So, just taking them out of your way straight away is definitely a good plan, because it kind of frees up what you want to get correct. And then think which feature, Salesforce really wants you to use, and what kind of feature they press, and, support processes, sales processes, things like that there. And then I guess just remember not to lose focus. If you do come across a question that you that throws you off, that you may not know the correct answer to, so just try and keep your focus and not lose some confidence there.
Mm-hmm. Right. Anything you want to
Yeah.
add, Shankar, from your experience?
Yeah, so in the exam, you will get a chance to put some questions for review. So you
Mm-hmm.
can definitely mark the confusing questions for review, and take a look at them at the end of the exam, because there's always a chance of getting clues from other questions present in the same exam. So for
Mm-hmm.
example, answer to a question might be available in some other question. So you can
Right.
definitely look for those chances.
Yep.
And I'm more of a go with first instinct person. So I usually after reading the question figure out answer in my mind and then look at the options. But you
Mm.
can also follow the process of elimination as mentioned by Luke, and you can eliminate the options and go with the right one. So these are the
Right.
two options.
Yeah, that's all we have. Two options. Anything you think which didn't went well, which put you off in your journey, which you think people should be aware of? Maybe try taking different
Yeah.
path.
Yeah,
Um,
so I kind of lost track in the middle due to various reasons because of work, procrastination, and other priorities.
Mm-hmm.
But preparing a plan and sticking to it really helps. I think this certification exam doesn't demand much. If you just spend 1 hour a day for 3 to 4 months, then you should be that should be enough to crack the exam.
yeah, for myself, I suppose I actually took the official Salesforce practice test, which was $20 at the time. Um, I didn't really find it too helpful. I guess the only helpful thing you can get out of it is actually memorizing the questions themselves. The only thing I suppose about the practice test is that it kind of puts you in the situation of the official test where you're just sitting at your laptop and you're kind of in that time frame just to answer the questions.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose then maybe I spent too long doing the trailhead modules without actually studying the topics themselves. So this is where, if I look back in it, that I would have split my time between actual, maybe that course on Udemy and doing the trail mixes at the same time. So maybe I went through the trailhead too quick, didn't absorb all the information, and only realized it then down the road.
Mm. Right. I agree. Yeah, I agree with that point. Maybe you should have some time plan. And what I feel for my certification is like maybe put your date of certification in your mind, a fixed date you have. And if you are not able to do that, you can at least go ahead and book the exam so that you have in your mind that that's the date I'm targeting, and then you plan for it and manage the time in that way that you cover up what you are trying to achieve in that time frame you have. Yeah. I think we covered a lot of things. Anything you both want to add, which I missed asking, or which you want to bring up before we move to final closing of the today's day?
I think there's a question from Stanley there. He says, did you
Mm-hmm.
guys pass the first time? And if you didn't pass the first time, what were the challenges?
Mm-hmm.
So I sat my first exam on the 5th of May, and I think I got 60% in it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I found was that there was a massive kind of, on that exam, there was a lot of questions for support processes and the sales processes that threw me off. The multiple answers were, I think, for the 2 or 3 questions that came up, was multiple answers, and you had to get 2 out of the 4
Mm-hmm.
for your selected answers. So definitely then two topics, and I guess then security as well, and just understanding visibility, and what you should kind of practice for maybe things like report folders, and then permission sets as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really helpful. I think Shankar has already mentioned he cleared in the first exam, first sitting. Okay. Anything else you want to add, Shankar?
Oh, yeah, so that's all. So you need to prepare a plan, create a roadmap for oneself, and just follow it.
Mm-hmm.
And the trail mix present on the trailhead should be, enough to crack the exam, followed by a course on Udemy and few mock tests. So
Mm.
that's all.
Right. Agree. That's great. Thank you very much for both of you for joining and sharing your insights. That would be really helpful for the fellow trailblazers to take that path. Like, see, I can see people are using that Mike Wheeler's Academy course. I think those things help out of Trailhead also looking into and listening to. I think there are a lot of good YouTube videos also you can go, and if you go on Trailhead Live, there's a thing called Trailhead Live. If you don't want to go to Udemy or those things, you can go to Trailhead Live and just search for any topic which you are trying to learn for. Like if you are trying to learn for uh, support processes, so just write support processes or service process, and then you will have a video there, Trailhead Live video given by certified instructors. So you can go through those videos. I think they are also really in-depth detail explanation of that particular small topic in Trailhead Live. Those videos are similar to kind of Udemy courses which we can look for. Great, congratulations to both of you. Thank you very much for joining. Moving forward, I would, I think, cover, this was just in my previous slide. I just wanted to cover this from my end as well. So these are small tips which I would say you can take care. So there are always multiple answer questions in the single answer question. So you should look for them carefully, that what they're asking for. Are they asking for 2 options or 3 options? And you select them appropriately, and don't miss out on any one of those options which can mark it completely wrong. You don't get half marks for any of those kind of scenarios. So it will be wrong if you answer less numbers or more number of answers there. So that's one thing to take care of. Second is the review flag. That is very important. So you can, whenever you feel this question is taking you off, you cannot answer it, just move forward and just mark it for review later. And then in the later time, you will have time to go back and think through that question in detail and complete that question. Then the next is all details of question and answer. I think Luke mentioned, so you should read that question in detail in twice or thrice, whichever takes you time to understand it completely, that what this question is asking for. Sometimes the question is formatted in such a way that it's talk about a thing and it's asking about another thing in Salesforce. It's talking about objects, and but it is trying to look for you to understand what record type to be used there. So try to get those details of those questions and then answer that question. And then look for the time, how much you are giving. So there are 60 questions and you have 1.5 hours for there to, and then manage your time well so that you complete it correctly. And last is hands-on practice. So that will help you in the real time in the exam. Whenever you are answering that question, just think of what you did when you did the hands-on, when you were trying to create actual support process. If you think through in that way what you did when you did the hands-on, you will get that answer very quickly. So that's the tips which I would like to share from my end. Then I have some additional informations which you should look for. So we talked about web assessor. So web assessor is the place where you register for your exam. You need to register for the exam in the webassessor.salesforce. I have the link given in this guide. So in this guide, I have given link for all the things. So there are trail mixes, which we set up part of the Salesforce Academy in Pramerica. So we have all those trail mix available on Trailhead. You can follow those trail mix. Then you have certification days webinar link. So you can register for those free webinars from Salesforce, a 5 hours webinar. I think they're already out for July. You can register for those sessions in July, and then quiz and flashcards. So there are a lot of quiz and flashcards free of charge available on the websites like Profros and Quizlets. So you can use those sites. I have given those links as well in the guide. And then lastly, there is a chatter groups. So in those chatter groups, you can collaborate with different people. You can join our Letterkenny developer groups. Chatter group, and then you can talk to Luke, Shankar, and myself in the chatter group, and we can collaborate there. If you have any doubt, anything, any questions which you're facing, challenge, we can talk there. And there are already different bigger chatter groups as well, like admin preparation study group and those things. So this is the guide there. I think, okay, I can put this for everyone here on the chat. So this is bit.ly/lk / admin guide. So that's the link, bit.ly/lk-admin-guide. So you can go there and look for all the um, resources. I have tried to put the links there in this guide. It's a PDF. If you don't have access to this guide, you can, I think you need to be part of the chatter group. So I think this is posted in our chatter group. So you can also just join the chatter group and then you will have access to this file. I think for that you can go in. So just join the chatter group with this second link which I have posted, and then you will have access to this guide as well. Okay, so any questions before we end up? Anything questions you have from anyone? Nothing on the chat I can see.
Nishant, I just wanted to ask how often are the exams done? Is it something that I can pick up anytime I'm ready, or there's set dates?
Yep, you can pick anytime. You can go to webassistant.salesforce.com, register there, and then you will find time slots available there on the particular date. And whichever time slot suits you, you pick that, and you can give the exam online on your laptop, sitting at home.
Okay, thank you.
There are online proctoring guidelines. So I have also put that in the admin guide, that what are the guidelines you should follow when you are giving the exam from home. So just look for that. There's a help article there I have put there as well. Okay. Anything else?
Nishant, I also wanted to mention that if anybody is using a work computer for the web assessors for their exam, just make sure that it works on the week that is coming up to their exam, because I had my admin access removed on the week of my exam. So I actually had to borrow someone else's laptop to complete the exam. Because you need to run that security application on your laptop, and it wouldn't let me run it. So
yeah, Senetel, I think you need to run that. Senetel.
Yeah, Senetel, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something just in case somebody's thinking about using the work laptop.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely we'll be putting the slides and the recording on the YouTube. You will have that. Yeah. Okay. So before closing, I'll just try to talk about the upcoming events. So there's a really great event coming up on 25th of June. That is Trailer DX, which is a really big developer events where you can admins, architects, everyone will be part of it, which used to happen in San Francisco, California every year, but this time it's happening virtual and it's free of cost. This time you can join live virtually in this event. Just register for it at trailerdx.com, and it should be with a lot of information and learnings there as well, and a lot of fun as well. Apart from that, locally we'll try to do some Trailer DX global gathering after the event happens. We'll try to meet and do some information there, what we gathered from Trailer DX. And there I have some lined up events like Salesforce DX, DevOps. I can talk about that. I can try to bring some MVP to present a session, but I think this was more my plan when it was a physical event, but now it's virtually. So I think it's difficult to do that. And then you can also post your ideas to collaborate on the chatter group we have, and then join the LKSF devs. So this is our Trailblazer community group where you can see what all upcoming events we have. And definitely in the next event, I'll also try to give certification vouchers, part of some quiz. So you can join that and earn a certification voucher in the upcoming event in Trailblazer community. So I think that's all for today. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining. Let's get connected and see you again. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nishant. Bye.